Sing hallelujah, come on, get happy. Get ready for the judgment.
Hey, welcome back to ScreenCrush. I'm Ryan Airy, and it's time to talk about Joker, Folie. Joker 2 is one of the most confounding movies I've ever seen. Warner Brothers was so confident in Todd Phillips after he made them $1 billion with Joker 1 that the studio seemed to have given him carte blanche here. They gave him a blank check and didn't even bother to screen the movie for test audiences.
Which isn't always a bad thing.
Very true. So, let's really dive into this movie and talk about what we loved, why it didn't work, and why did it work so damn hard to piss off fans of the original film. Now, a little later, I'm going to be joined by a panel of folks who either loved or hated the movie so we can have a spirited discussion. But first, let's look at how we got here. And then, a little later, I'm going to tell you guys my thoughts. Spoiler alert, I seem to be the only person in the world that thought this movie was kind of great. And a little bit later, I'm going to tell you why, in some ways, it worked better than Deadpool and Wolverine.
Oh, no. Careful.
Oh yeah, it's going to be fun. And just a reminder, at our merch store right now, you can get our Joker-inspired parody merch, the Monday shirt, the I Have a Condition card shirt and hoodie with laughter in the back, and the Murray Franklin bloodstained shirt and mug. You can also get tickets to our live show, first show in Boston on November 14th. It's going to be a lot of fun. You can buy tickets and join our Discord below. So, the 2019 Joker film was one of those movies that you kind of first heard about as a rumor. The guy who made The Hangover is doing some Martin Scorsese take on the Joker. It just seemed like it wasn't real. I mean, that movie, though, did come along at the perfect time. We had just wrapped up the Infinity Saga, and comic book movie fans were ready for something different from, the green screen action of the MCU. And we hadn't really seen a good depiction of the Joker on screen since 2008, and the DCEU was spinning its wheels after Justice League and just looking for a direction. So there was a need in our favorite subgenre for something that felt familiar and new, and the Joker fulfilled that. But also, the Joker had a political and economic message that I really admired. At its core, it was about a poor, mentally ill, abused man who simply wants to be seen. Our society often ignores people like Arthur because they're weird or unpleasant or they just make us uncomfortable. And so, the people of Gotham City latched onto Arthur and turned him into a martyr, even murdering Thomas Wayne in his image. Now, the image of Arthur at the top of the car in the first film was celebrated by some audience members in the real world. People thought that this was the moment when Arthur achieves his peak. But I think it's actually when Arthur and Gotham City are at their lowest point. Mob rule and rioting might make people feel better in the short term, but ultimately, this does nothing to actually improve people's lives. The crowd became as insane as Arthur, and in the real world, people identified with this insanity. Just like the crowd in the movie, the real world audience imprinted their own disaffection onto Arthur and saw him as a symbol of the working class. And you can't blame them. I mean, after all, the movie is designed to do this. Arthur is ignored by his supposed father, the billionaire Thomas Wayne, and his meds are cut off by neoliberalist policies. But the movie does not have a message of pro-violence. Arthur doesn't actually care about protecting other people or facing the system. He's a mentally ill man who murders bullies because they triggered his childhood trauma. And yet, that movie was so effective at getting people to identify with him as a protagonist. Audiences celebrated his murders and even dressed up as him to walk down those stairs up in the Bronx.
Yeah, so why did he resonate so strongly with so many people?
Well, this is what I'm getting to, right? Because Joker, the character, has also become a cultural symbol of people who are disaffected with the system, who believe the system cannot be fixed and that it's permanently broken. This is why you see the Joker's image pop up in protest signs and those stupid "we live in a society" memes. And he's also the symbol of some very violent and shocking imagery on the internet that we won't show here. So I don't think that Todd Phillips and Joaquin Phoenix could have ever predicted that their little Scorsese clown movie would have taken off in this way. And I think they were a little horrified by some of the people who celebrated Arthur's violence. And so, they did something audacious. They made an entire sequel that was designed to shame the audience. Or, as our own Matt Singer put it in our Ending Explained video, the entire movie was a literal prosecution of the first film. Joker, Folie seems designed to piss off fans of the original movie.
Gee, I wonder why people didn't like it then.
Yeah, but that's another reason I kind of love it. Not because I hate the first movie. I actually love the first Joker film because it's the rare comic book movie that takes the source material and then uses it to say something about the real world. I mean, these movies are not just cash grabs. They have something to say. Arthur is portrayed in a very human way in this film. He isn't the leader of a movement. He's an imperfect person who is trying to better himself. And we can all relate to that because we all have aspects of ourselves that we would like to change or that cause self-harm.
I know I do. I am still not welcome in St. Louis.
Well, for instance, whenever whenever I get like super stressed out, I want to squeeze my face really hard or clench my jaw on one side. So I needed something to help me forget those bad oral fixation habits and replace them with a positive habit. And that is why I started using Fume. They're the sponsor of this video.
Hold on now, person. Is that a vape?
No, Doug, this is not a vape. It's not electronic, and it does not have pods filled with potentially harmful chemicals. Instead, it has these little plant-based cores that are infused with natural flavors to create natural flavored air. You see, guys, the flavored air category is quickly becoming the leading alternative to vaping and smoking. Fume contains no nicotine, it is not addictive, and it contains non-toxic flavors. Instead, it contains plant-based flavors like spearmint ice, cinnamon hearts, and my current favorite, crisp mint.
Oh, that's why your breath has been smelling so nice lately.
Yes, it is. See, guys, with flavored air, you can satisfy your oral fixation through a passive diffusion system that does not use electronics, vapor, or combustion. But mostly, I like that it gives me something to reach for when I'm feeling anxious. It even has movable parts for fidgeting that make an incredibly satisfying sound. And you can get the Fume topper, which is a rubber wrapper for the end, which is good for chewing. Fume has served more than 300,000 customers like myself, and you can be their next success story. For a limited time, use my code ScreenCrush to get your free topper. Now, this is the perfect accessory for your Fume device. Slip it onto the mouthpiece for a softer, warmer feel. It's chewable for those who love to fidget, and it's reusable. So head to tryfume.com, that's tryfum.com, and use code ScreenCrush or scan the QR code on screen to get your free Fume topper when you order your Journey Pack today. Now, back to Joker Folie Deux. So, like I was saying, this movie actually had a message at its core. In the first movie, Arthur struggles to be seen, and in this movie, he is dealing with the consequences of being seen. Harley Quinn is not his sidekick. She's the villain. She's a combination of the rich elites who bullied Arthur in the first film and the poor underclass who cheered him at the ending of the film. She fell in love with a version of Arthur from the television and doesn't care to see who he really is. Now, I understand this is a very controversial reimagining of Harley Quinn, and I know Brianna has some thoughts that we can talk about in just a bit, but I admire that the movie is taking big swings. I keep comparing this movie to the two most recent MCU films, The Marvels and Deadpool and Wolverine. So The Marvels, look, it was aggressively fine. It had the scene with the cats, it had Kamala Khan, and it had the musical number, 3 great scenes and really no bad ones. But then, step back and ask yourself, why did it have that musical number? Because it was weird and fun? Or did it actually serve a point to tell the story and theme of the movie?
The answer is no.
In Joker, Folie is that in the first film, Arthur has music in him. That's why he makes those weird contorted dance poses. You see, in musicals, people break out into song when they are so overwhelmed with emotion that speech fails them. And that's what happens in this film. Joker and Lee sing to one another in a heightened reality that shows their delusional state of mind. Now, whether you like the musical numbers or not, or you think Lady Gaga held back her voice too much, you have to admit, this is all a very big swing for a movie in our particular subgenre. In fact, The Marvels even had a similar theme to this movie. Both films were about the protagonist trying to live up to people's expectations and fighting against their own negative image. I think that Joker Folie Deux was more successful in that goal because, well, the Marvel films don't ever really show us who Carol Danvers is. They'll tell us who she is, they'll show snippets of flashbacks of her childhood, and then in the Marvels, Carol has a VO of her destroying the Supreme Intelligence where she tells us who she is.
I thought the only way to stop it was to destroy it.
But those movies never really slow down to show Carol interacting in a way that fleshes out her character. Whereas Joker Folie Deux is a heartbreaking character study that explores the consequences of fame and the consequences of people casting their own identities onto celebrities. Now, a lot of people hate the ending because it shows Arthur, the man, being murdered, while the false version of Arthur, the Joker, lives on. But that's just how society has always functioned. People die, but their stories live on. Or, as the reporter in The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance says,
when the legend becomes fact, print the legend.
Now, in just a bit, I want to tell you guys why I think this movie was actually a little more successful than Deadpool and Wolverine. But first, I want to talk to our incredible panel of guests. I am joined here by activist, actor, and DC superfan and musical superfan Cameron Kasky, our very own Brianna McLarty, who has some interesting thoughts on Harley Quinn in this film, and of course Colton Ogburn, the guy who's trapped in our television but doesn't know it, so please, please, please do not tell him. Cameron, I want to talk to you first, because you're the biggest DC fan that I know. You've basically consumed these comic books before you even knew how to read. What was your take on Joker 2, Folie Deux?
I was very excited to hear that they were doing a Joker musical because I love musicals and I love the Joker. And then I watched the movie and it's like a musical that hates that it's a musical and a comic book movie that hates that it's a comic book movie. This was the case in the first Joker movie with the Waynes. I was watching the movie and I said, why does this have to be the Waynes? It's not going to make an effort to tie into the DC universe. This Batman kid isn't going to become Batman. Why do I have to go watch Joker walk up to a mansion and put his fingers in some kid's mouth? It's just distracting. So you're watching this movie, and you've got the lawyer Harvey Dent, soon to be Two-Face. This guy's given a great performance as Harvey, and you watch the whole movie, you walk out, and you're like, why did that have to be Harvey Dent? And there's a lot that I struggled with in this movie, but just in terms of the opening statements of it all, it felt like a comic book musical that hated comic books and musicals.
I know, but look, we've argued about Joker before, the first movie, and I like that it's an Elseworld story that takes the elements and remixes them. I mean, I'm looking at all the movies, we have no deficit of comic book material now, or at least adaptations for the screen. I'm glad people are getting weird and taking risks, especially with the characters and their original roles, and maybe examining the Wayne family as not this philanthropic, all good doing organization. But Brianna, you're a person who I think is a huge Harley Quinn fan. You've talked about her here on the channel before, and this was the most controversial portrayal of Harley Quinn ever. Like, what were your thoughts on this?
I was not a fan of this movie. I agree completely that it is a comic book movie that does not want to be a comic book movie, and I think that is probably, in my opinion, the most aggressive with Harley Quinn. It is one thing to have a new interpretation of the character. I can even say that the first Joker was a new interpretation of the Joker. It is very different to fundamentally not understand the source material or to honestly mock it or change it in a way that's pretty offensive. Harley Quinn's whole arc, like from Mad Love, is she's in an abusive relationship with the Joker over the comic book arc and through certain like movies and TV shows. She has gotten out of that abusive relationship and become her own person. That is a huge part of her arc. It has drawn a lot of people to the character. To make her the manipulative evil one in this movie, it's frankly rude. It's rude to the creators. It's rude to the fans. I don't think it's a new interpretation. I think it is really problematic. I think a lot of times women are kind of blamed for their own abuse in real life and in real domestic violent situations. They are made to be the villains. And actually making her the villain, I thought, I was watching it and I kept thinking, oh, okay, well, they're going to like turn it around. It's going to be like Mad Love, where she goes in and she's kind of trying to get fame from him, but then he immediately manipulates her. And this whole thing has been about how he molds her from the beginning. And as I got further in, I was like, oh no, they're just like making her evil. And like, if you know her comic book storyline, it's really awful. Like, I think it's really rude to the creators of the original character, and I just find it, I think you can say that there's a new interpretation and Todd Phillips is doing something different. This could have been an original character and it would have felt very different. I think to take a character that is well known for escaping an abusive relationship and then completely change that, I don't think that's cool. I think it really sucks for fans of Harley Quinn, especially if people maybe went in because they related to her or liked her, and to give them that portrayal is, I think that's pretty hard. It's a hard pill to swallow.
Heard, and you make some great points. I'm going to make a couple counterpoints in terms of adapting a comic book character and then ask you a couple direct questions about that. One, same point about Joker in the first film. That was not a portrayal of the Joker. That was simply taking elements of the Joker and his story and then using them to tell a different story. Like, the Joker knows who he is. He fully embraces who he is. Arthur in the first film and this film has no idea who he is. He's not in his nature a violent person. He just simply reacts to bullies in a way that unfortunately a lot of people who were abused do react. Now, as to your point about taking the story from the comics and, not adapting it the same way, well, not even the comics, the animated series, I guess, because she originated in Batman the Animated Series. Isn't there something to be said for, we've seen that adaptation. We've seen it adapted in live action with Margot Robbie, Birds of Prey, great movie. Even better in the Suicide Squad. We've seen it obviously portrayed the first time, then done in the comics, and then in the animated series, which is also excellent. What's wrong with, and I'm not talking about Harley specifically, but really a question for both of you, what's wrong with creators taking that source material and saying, we've had 3 Jokers, let's do a different kind of Joker movie. We've had Harley Quinn, now let's do a different kind of Harley Quinn movie. Whereas I think like something like the Super Kiss in Superman 2 is actually more disregarding comic book material because they're trying to be loyal, but they're also just making crap up for the sake of plot convenience. Brianna, what do you think about that? Like, isn't it possible to take these characters and simply approach them from a different way?
I completely agree. It is possible to take these characters and approach them from a different way, and I would actually say The Dark Knight does a great job of that with their Joker. Like that Joker clearly didn't fall into a vat of acid. He's wearing makeup. He's like very different from the comic book Joker, but there is enough reference to source material and like kind of Easter eggs sprinkled out that he feels like the Joker. This Joker and this Harley Quinn do not feel like that. It doesn't feel like they're approaching them from a different way. I could maybe say again, the Joker, you can kind of maybe say this is like a different origin story. I also think it's very different to approach them from a different way or have a different take on them versus like disregarding key points that are already a little bit tense of their source material. I think that is a very different thing. And I think the point he was trying to make with Harley Quinn, again, it is sort of what Cam was saying. It doesn't feel like it had to be Harley Quinn. Like if that, I may have felt differently about the movie if it had just been an original character. I would have been like, oh, okay, cool. But to just, again, take something that is so fundamental to her character development and has been this major arc for her, and then to sort of flip it on its head, I don't think it was approaching it from a new way. I don't think it was approaching it from a new way. It was, in fact, just, again, it was showing a blatant lack of respect for the source material that, again, there's a reason this character has resonated with people. There's a reason she's one of the only characters to come from the animated series into the comics, into live action. People relate to her and like her for a reason. And again, I don't think you can just say that's a new interpretation. That's a new way to look at her character, especially again, when it is a sensitive issue. It is something that unfortunately women are blamed for. So to have that take on it, I don't think it's just a new take. I don't think it exists in a vacuum. It exists within the larger universe and with a larger fan base that already like this character. And again, she means a lot to a lot of people. I really like her. I'm like, I couldn't swallow it. I couldn't deal with it.
Oh, and great points. And I'm not here to tell you to, like or to change how you feel about something. And I just want to quickly note that, obviously Harley Quinn has become somebody who's an inspiration to women or girls who are abused. And if you are watching this and you are suffering domestic abuse, there is help for you. We have a link in the description and a phone number you can click and a phone number you can call to find help. Like there's always a way out. Just so we're clear on that. Brianna, do you think that Harley Quinn is somebody, though? One thing I've loved about Harley Quinn recently is, in the animated series, the first season was about her breaking away from Joker. In the Suicide Squad, it was about her really, we saw her break away in Birds of Prey, so now she's her own character. Do you think it's healthy to move this character past a past of abuse? Like, I don't think she should always be defined by how she's been mistreated, or do you disagree?
I think you can definitely move the character away from that. I think you can definitely move the character out of that. I think that's completely true, and I would love to see, especially in live action, more of Harley Quinn standing on her own 2 feet and like having her own stories. I know I'm kind of like different. I love Birds of Prey. I think that's a very fun movie, at least from her perspective.
It is very underrated. It's pretty great.
I think it's so fun. I just don't think that this was, I think this wasn't really moving her past the abuse. They just kind of made her more in the role of the abuser, which is like, I don't think that's the same thing. You didn't like see her separate from the Joker. You didn't see her really having her own storyline. All she is at a different seat of the table of that.
So Brianna, that's a great point. Cam, you're champing at the bit to say something. Hop in there. Then we got to hear from Colton.
Okay, so real quick, to the comic book of it all, listen, I've read thousands of comic books. I love comic books, but I'll tell most people, 98% of them aren't even that good. So I don't care about people changing the comic book. Go ahead. But it gets to a point where it's like, all right, if you make a movie about an accountant who likes to beat up leprechauns with a guitar and you call him Batman, is that like just a new interpretation of Batman? How much, when you take it all away, how much is it still a new interpretation of the character? But that's a different story. And this really isn't very much Harley Quinn at all. It is a woman Joker meets in prison, not even the same way he meets the original Harley, whatever. Let's go to this idea that this movie is some sort of rebuttal against the toxic fans of the first movie. So incels see the first movie and they feel empowered to take their anger out on other people. So then they will be remembered as a legend the way the Joker is in the first film. So the second film combats this perception by having a hot woman become obsessed with the Joker and obsessed with his persona. So even though you're putting Harley in the chair of the person with the power in this dynamic, in this abusive dynamic, she still is doing it all because she's obsessed with Joker because he did something so great on TV when he shot that guy. And you're like, I'm trying to understand where the commentary is. I'm trying to understand what this movie is trying to say at all.
Well, I think the movie is about those people you mentioned, those Joker fans who maybe took the wrong message away from it, who were embracing anarchy and chaos and violence, but also about how we attach ourselves to famous people. And Brianna, you're not wrong about it being like this problematic stereotype of the female stalker when it's well documented the majority of stalking is conducted by men, abusive men who go on to unfortunately abuse those women. But in this case, go ahead.
Like with Cam's point too, it's like incels who famously related to the Joker and famously don't like women. It's like, oh yeah, you see, like she really only liked him for the fake him. She's actually awful. She's the evil one. Like, I don't think that's commentary either. Like, that's just like, oh no, like this hatred of women that the original fan base already had, that's actually justified. That's so real because, like, of course, the woman is the actual bad one. Like, I don't think the commentary is there. I agree with Cam. It's not there even from a meta point away from the character.
It's a very interesting take that maybe in trying to point a finger at some of that toxic fandom, they actually had three fingers pointing back at themselves. And just real quick before we finally hear from Colton, I want to just flag Cameron soft pitching his new Netflix series about a superhero who hits leprechauns with a baseball bat who's called Batman. That sounds like it's something I would really like to watch. And I don't appreciate you trying to weave in your pitch deck on this show. Colton,
I do.
What did you think of the movie?
I love my two friends here, Cam and Brianna, but I fundamentally disagree with virtually everything they've said throughout this talkback. To Cameron's first point about why have the Waynes in the first Joker? Why have Harvey Dent in this one? As if that's like a negative. Why not? It's a Joker movie. To the point, I mean, you're going to have Batman characters in it. That's kind of the point. Unless your point is, well, this movie just shouldn't even be called Joker. This criticism that it's a comic book movie that hates the fact that it's a comic book movie. What is a comic book movie? We've had the same thing genre-wise for like the past 25 years now or more. I appreciate the fact that Marvel Studios has started doing this, but DC is doing it as well with shows like The Penguin, with movies like The Joker. They're transcending the genre. They're using the standard, Hollywood mission of using IP that they have to help push the property and, slap the title Joker on the movie, but they're letting creatives come in and just tell a fresh story. It doesn't have to be a pow kablam giant explosion, even though there was a giant explosion at the end of this movie. I'll concede that point. But we have to get past this idea of a comic book movie has to fit into these certain, holes in order for it to work. As far as the Harley Quinn stuff goes, God, I couldn't disagree more. And I know, I'm white guy over here that liked the first Joker, but I think that what they did with Harley was they did show her being abused by the Joker in the sense that she has been corrupted by the Joker movement. The first Joker movie and this sequel is not about Arthur Fleck being the Joker. Arthur Fleck is not Joker. Joker is Joker, and Joker really in these movies is a movement, is a societal collapse, showing us the origins of not just how a Joker can come to be, but just of Gotham City's turmoil, the type of societal conditions that create the need for a character like Batman. So I think having Harley Quinn be a victim of the Joker movement was really well done. And then she realizes at the end, this guy is not Joker. Joker's not even a thing. The guy who we're worshiping here, he's a showman. He's not real. He's just this weak, mentally ill guy. And she rejects Joker. She walks away from him. So I had to push back on that. This weekend, I've thought a lot about this movie, and I've been asking myself, am I wrong? What movie did I see that's obviously so different from the movie that a lot of others seem to have seen?
I've been wondering the same thing.
Yeah, I'm usually really sensitive to things like pacing and things like that. But I thought the movie was paced well. I thought it was acted well. I loved the musical aspects because in the first Joker, at the end, we hear Arthur start singing. And that to me just immediately says, okay, this movie is through the lens of a musical. We're seeing the musical numbers, but all that is just a different interpretation of the same thing we saw in the first Joker, which was when he would go off into his hallucinations of things that weren't actually happening. I think Matt said this, and Ryan, I think even you as somebody who liked the movie has said this, that this movie is a slap in the face to the fans of the original. I completely disagree. I know that there are some, people who don't like me at all, who like the first Joker movie and try to say that it like empowered them or whatever. I don't know. I liked it. I thought the first Joker movie had a very progressive message about how we need to pay attention to things like mental health, healthcare, helping those in poverty.
Economic disparity.
Yeah, sure. Are there a few loudmouths on Twitter who hate the Acolyte and love the Joker and, that's their whole shtick? Sure. But I think it's honestly kind of, I just fundamentally disagree with this idea that the first Joker movie is the incel movie. I've always despised that critique.
I do think it was embraced by certain people that I referenced earlier. And I'm not trying to say that, only a certain demographic liked it. I do think there was a certain demographic who really liked it in kind of a scary way. But I think similar demographics may watch The Boys and become Homelander fans and were recently surprised to find out the show had a different political message than what they thought, right?
What's the difference? But here's my question to those with that critique. What is the difference between the first Joker movie, incentivizing, I guess you could say, that type of stuff? What's the difference between that and Heath Ledger's Joker? Heath Ledger's Joker was a terrorist who said the world was unfair and did terrible things.
Well,
that's the Joker character.
But the direct, if you're going to actually, if we're going to look at these two movies and why they're different, it's because at no point in The Dark Knight, even though Heath Ledger's Joker was cool and we all walked around with the Why So Serious shirts and Halloween costumes, even though he was cool, nobody actually thought it was a good thing to blow up a hospital with kids in it. Like that's the difference there. Whereas,
nobody thought it was a good thing to shoot Murray Franklin in the head.
You would be surprised. You would be surprised. And that's the difference between the people we're talking about. There were people who thought that it was badass that he took violent, extreme actions against the wealthy and the powerful in the face of the media. Sorry, Brianna, I cut you off.
Well, I'm going to kind of like halfway agree with Colton. I really do like the first film. And a lot of my things I always said about the first film was that it was kind of misunderstood, that like, yes, the Joker or Arthur Fleck could be sympathetic. And then when he leans into his awfulness and his worst tendencies, he becomes a villain. He is no longer supposed to be a sympathetic figure. The film isn't about like, oh, well, this guy's justified for doing that. It's very like, it is very purposely pointing out, hey, just because all this stuff happens to you and it is really sad doesn't mean you can go do this. And I always thought Todd Phillips trusted the audience a little bit too much to get that. Like I was always like, you maybe should have like pushed that a little more. Like you had too much faith in your audience because a lot of people did not take that message. Yeah. Speaking of Colton's Harley Quinn point, I think that is a very cool interpretation that does make me like this Harley Quinn more. But I guess it's sort of like the first movie is like, if that was the point, I think Todd Phillips just, again, maybe trusted his audience too much, because as I was watching it, and as someone who likes Harley Quinn, and I didn't see that. Like when you say it, I'm like, okay, I could see that. I don't think that was, if that was his point, I don't necessarily think that was pushed to the forefront in the way. Ryan liked the film, and he said in the breakdown that Harley Quinn was the villain of the movie. I think it did position her more in the villain role, even though I do think that's I think that's a good interpretation. I just wish if that was the goal of the film, he had pushed that harder and made that clearer instead of maybe leaving it up to her interpretation or just really painting her as a villain. And then you really have to like go down and like look at it more concretely.
I was going to say, I think that's right to your point, Ryan, that Harley Quinn was the villain of the movie, but that is because in this movie, Arthur Fleck is not the Joker. Harley Quinn is the Joker. Harley Quinn is the one who has now fallen victim to this movement that was started in the first movie. She's the embodiment of the Joker character, I think, in this movie.
This is interesting, the way that we talk about falling victim to the Joker and how Arthur is not the Joker, because in my opinion, the Joker is the best when he is, in fact, the Joker. And of course, other people can be influenced by it. But I think the idea that, the wrong people saw the first movie and they liked it and he thought this was a good guy was partially because of that. I agree, sort of progressive messaging you were talking about, that we need to be investing more in mental health services and in strengthening our society itself. But what's happening is this movie is taking the responsibility out of Arthur's hands. And they're saying the Joker is a symptom of a broken society, which is totally true, except that doesn't mean Arthur is all jolly well to do it. Now, I don't like the origin from The Killing Joke. I think The Killing Joke is a thrilling piece of fiction, but generally speaking, I think the Joker is the best as a mysterious character. I think most people will agree that Heath Ledger's Joker is the best depiction. I mean, Nicholson's amazing. Joaquin Phoenix does some amazing stuff, but Heath Ledger's Joker has this mystery, and it brings to mind Batman Mask of the Phantasm, which is my favorite Batman movie ever. In Batman Mask of the Phantasm, the Joker has this quality to him that Mark Hamill's Joker normally does, which is you watch this Joker and you kind of think he's a little funny. And Joaquin Phoenix had some funny moments, by all means. But there's something about Mark Hamill's animated Joker that's kind of a little charming. And you watch it, and it has this visceral feeling where you're like, oh no, I kind of am enjoying this dark and twisted person on screen. Same with Ledger. There's something a little funny about it. There's something a little charming. And you can almost put yourself in the room and understand why different crime bosses can be kind of moved by this guy. And the last thing I'll say is, like, the thing in the first Joker that worked for me, because I liked the first Joker. I am a, fairly progressive person who is the survivor of gun violence. And I think that all the messages that Joker won was this incel disaster. It's like, you know what? Then go watch a PG-13 movie, okay? It's an R-rated movie. People are going to get murdered. That's what's on the ticket. So I liked the first Joker, but part of why I liked it was because you watch Arthur Fleck and you have this emotional investment in what he's doing, because you say, I don't like that he's doing the wrong thing, because this is a world that makes people bad. This is a world that makes people bad. So when I'm watching him do this bad thing, I have this emotional response that I wish this wasn't the case. I wish he could be a kind person in an unkind world. But by Joker 2, I'm watching it and I'm like, okay, well, not kind anymore. So I don't know what I'm supposed to be feeling.
Guys, unfortunately, we are going to run out of time, so we do have to wrap up. But I'd like to just go around, give everybody just one last take, sum it up for me, what you're thinking, and shout out your socials while we do it. Brianna, let's start with you.
My socials are Brianna T. McClarty on Instagram and TikTok. My last thought on this is Todd Phillips, make an original character. Yeah, that's my thought.
Colton Ogburn.
You can find me on Twitter at Colton Ogburn here on ScreenCrush. My final thought would be, one of the more recent Joker comics is Batman 3 Jokers. And the idea that comic pushed forward is that Joker is not a person. Joker is an idea. Joker is transcends the physical form. So I really appreciated this duology that kind of showed that Joker is a movement of corruption and how that corruption affects the lower depths of society and can create pure, just psychotic evil. So maybe I'm going a little too deep with it, but I really liked the first these two Joker movies, and I'm right and everybody else is wrong.
Like I said, in a little bit, I'm going to tell you guys what I thought about this movie as compared to Deadpool and Wolverine. But first, Cameron Kasky, where can the people find you, and final thoughts, please?
I'm at Cameron Kasky on Instagram. Don't have Twitter, so just follow Colton. And the final thought would be, generally speaking, if I were a warden of a prison and a mentally unwell prisoner tried to escape with a famous murderer, and the two of them were about to jump the gate, I would not immediately release that person because the murderer was a bad influence on them and say, oh, you're spending too much time with the murderer. Go on home, have a good one. We'll see you at the court case for the murderer.
Well said. Now, I'm going to tell you guys my final thought and what I think about how this movie stacks up against Deadpool and Wolverine. Now, earlier I said I wanted to compare Deadpool and Wolverine to this movie because I think they each had a similar message, and Joker 2 was more successful in executing that message. But first, I have to say, I much prefer Deadpool and Wolverine. Like, I would watch that movie right now, and I don't know if I'll ever see Joker 2 a second time, like outside of work stuff. But here's where both movies were very similar. They each revolved around hero worship. I mean, let's face it, Deadpool and Wolverine Wolverine is basically all about how everybody loved the ending of Logan so much that now they're trying to justify bringing Wolverine back into another universe.
Fox killed him. Disney brought him back. They're gonna make him do this till he's 90.
They're both very meta takes, where characters are looking at the events of the previous movies and evaluating them as art. However, I think that Joker Folie Deux was more successful because it grounded all of this in character. Deadpool and Wolverine is designed to be a fun crowd pleaser, but it's also really confusing. We talked about this in our plot holes video, but the idea that there's like 2 Logans in Wade's universe, or that anchored beings destroy a timeline when they die, it's all very muddled. But apart from all of those in-universe mechanics, I didn't think the movie did a great job establishing what Wade actually wants and why he wants it. We got the opening prologue where he tries to join the Avengers, but we don't really know why he wanted to join the Avengers until late in the third act of the movie. The first 2 films gave him clear motivations, save his relationship with Vanessa. But in this film, I never really understood why he and Vanessa were split apart to begin with. And by the way, that's fine, because the point of the movie was to get Hugh Jackman and Deadpool together to have some fun, and it's great. Now, Joker Folie Deux, not fun at all. It is mostly depressing, and when it's not depressing, it's just setting you up to be depressed later on. Oh, you're rooting for the Joker? Well, you're an idiot because the Joker isn't real. Oh, you think Lee and Arthur have a cute love story? Well, you're wrong because she's manipulating him to feel better about herself. This movie is the anti-Deadpool and Wolverine because it's not trying to provide any fan service. It does not care what I think, and I don't even think the movie wants my money. And guys, you have to admit, spending $200+ million on a movie designed to bomb, there is nothing more Joker than that. And by the way, everybody, don't forget to head to tryfume.com, that's tryfum.com, and use our code ScreenCrush or scan this QR code on screen to get your journey back today with your free Fume topper. So, what did you guys think of Joker 2? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below or at me on Twitter. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe, smash that bell for alerts. For ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Airy.